I am Anne Segalini, and I'm a senior lecturer in occupational therapy. And I currently am module leader for the module Functional Human Sciences, which is a level 4 module, which is 40 credits, and it basically covers anatomy, physiology, psychology, psychiatry, and we particularly focus on the lived experience of patients with those conditions.
And you're using TBL within that module?
Yeah, we've been using TBL. This is our second year. We used it for the first time last year. Prior to that, the day consisted, it's a full day throughout the 3 terms, and it consisted of the students coming in for face-to-face lectures in the morning. And then what we would do in the afternoon, they would listen to a patient story, a service user story, and then we would get them to do activities based on that service user story to apply the knowledge that they'd learnt that morning.
So what was the driver to moving away from conventional methods of teaching to move towards using TBL?
Okay, there was a couple of drivers. Obviously, we were trying to look at different ways of learning in preparation for Waterside and when we move across, to use more online and e-blended learning methods. The other thing that we found, obviously, when you're teaching things such as psychology, anatomy, physiology, it's anything that you can get out of a textbook, really, and we wanted to make the experience of the module more dynamic for the students rather than just being sat there for 3 hours listening to us talk about the skeleton, different types of joints, etc.
And in the shifting towards using TBL, how did you prepare the students for the new experience of delivery?
Because they were level 4 students, in some ways they weren't familiar with any other method of delivery, because our module runs pretty much from day one. So the first session we did was very much, the morning was based about introducing them to TBL, how it works, the structure of the day, why it's of benefit to them. We asked them to think about their learning styles and what they want, the manner in which they want to learn. Do they want to learn just the facts and the figures, or do they want to be able to learn skills to apply that knowledge to the people that they're going to be treating in the future? And they all agreed that was the way that they wanted to go, which obviously TBL fits in with that philosophy. So we had a morning doing that, and then we introduced the module and the basic principles of the module itself. And then on the very first session, we gave them a practice individual and group readiness assessment on the day based on the information that we gave them that morning. So they had a feel of what it would look like. And we went through and we gave them the killer questions as well, based on the teaching that they'd had that morning actually on TBL teaching and the introduction bit to the module.
How did you prepare for the students' engagement in pre-reading activities?
So what we developed on Nile was a workbook, like an e-learning resource, and we gave them links to different online resources to learn the material and complete the workbook. They are given a week to complete the workbook, so it's always put up a week in advance from when the test occurs. The range of resources that we use varied depending on the topic covered, because in this module we cover anything from musculoskeletal to depression, mood disorders, so it's quite a big range. Students would complete the workbook in their own time, and then they would revise that workbook. They would come in, and the first thing that they would have 20 minutes to do a 20 question MCQ, and then in groups, in their teams, they would then complete a team readiness assessment, and they wouldn't get the results from the individual one, they'd just go straight into the team one. At the end of that, they get their results, And while they're doing the team readiness assessment, they're also given an appeal sheet so they can question and query the content of any of the questions that they've had. So either based on the way that we've worded it, or if they feel that the information, the correct answer isn't the correct answer, they're able to argue the point, which shows and helps develop their learning on the topic, because you need to know the topic really well to be able to appeal the question. So it's another form of getting the depth of learning. After they've done that, what we do is we provide an application section. So we use based on what they've had on the workbook, we get them to apply that knowledge in different scenarios. So for example, in the musculoskeletal one, the workbook asks them questions about joints, about the bones, etc. And then what we do is we get them to come in after the tests, and they have to assemble the skeleton. They have to look at different movements, for example, putting on a jumper, taking off a jumper, and then they have to analyse which joints are moving, what movements are occurring, what muscles are helping those movements. And that's the application part of the theory. They then go for lunch, and then what tends to happen is we use a service user story. So because part of the thing is that they'll get they have to learn about conditions, so like fractures, amputations, depression, and we will get a service user story, and it gets either the service user, we've been looking this year, we've been able to get service users to come in face to face and talk to the students and tell them what it means to live with those conditions, or we've used like open learning resources like either Health Talk Online or YouTube to get people's stories. And then what we do is we apply the killer questions to those stories. So depending on what the story is and what we want the students to learn, we give them the killer question. So it might be, for Fred, what was the most important element to his recovery? And we'll give them 5 options, and then the students have to say which one they think in a timed fashion, so they will hold up their numbers at the same time, and then we discuss why each team came up with that answer, and then they negotiate between them and argue their points and back up their points as to why they think their answer is right and others isn't, which shows quite a high level of learning, because they have to process all the information they've had from the workbook, from the application section, and from listening to the service user to be able to come up with an answer at the end. So it's a much better way of getting feedback from the students than, say, for example, using flip charts or just getting them to say, why do you, in a feedback manner that normally occurs in lectures.
And have the students seemed to be engaged with the process?
Yes, because what you find with other methods of feedback and discussion, sometimes you can find that they phase in and out. Again, listen to another group discussing their points, and they phase in and out. But when you're putting it to them, okay, so you're saying this team's saying this, which one's right, and you're getting a discussion and debate about the question, they're much more engaged, and they show a much higher level of thinking because they're having to continuously debate why their answer's correct.
And what's the frequency of running those style of workshops?
So the basic principles occur every week throughout the whole module. We don't, for the last 3 sessions, we don't do the tests because 12 we found is adequate. And the last 3 sessions we tend to be more complex conditions such as dementia that can't cover a lot of the theory that they've previously done, because there's a physical component, there's a mental health component, there's a psychological component, same with pain. So they tend to be the more complex conditions we leave till the end, and we do those in more a traditional manner. We still keep the killer questions, but we don't do the workbooks and the tests.
And have you enjoyed facilitating these kind of workshops?
Yeah, I mean, the students' knowledge is much higher than previous years when we were doing face-to-face we did it more complex than this, but like, you know, this is a femur, this is the ulna, this is the radius. The level of engagement of the students is much higher. Their knowledge when they come in to do the application is much higher. They're much more willing to discuss and debate and ask questions because the level that they're coming in is much higher. They go on practice placements, they go and work in clinical settings as part of the course, and the feedback from the last 2 years has been that from the practice educators, the people that supervise them when they're on placement, has been that their knowledge base is much higher than previous years. I didn't think the students had 12 tests. Prior to this, when we were doing it in the traditional manner, they would do 100 question MCQ at the end of the year, at the end of the autumn term. But we asked last year's lot which they preferred, and they said, "Oh no, we'd much prefer having the smaller tests than if you'd given us the bigger tests."
Good. Thank you for your time.
Very well.